Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mark Gough, and I am the Executive Director of the Natural Capital Coalition. Today's webinar is for members of the Coalition for several reasons. First of all, we're going to be launching the report that we have just produced, which is Natural Capital Protocol Feedback Report from Business Engagement Partners interviews that we've carried out. We're also going to be launching the Natural Capital Protocol Principles and Framework draft that we have put together, and we'll be taking you through the work that we've done with those and are in our thinking. It's going to be an opportunity to give you an update on where we are and what happened at our members event in London at the Institute for Chartered Accountants of England a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be giving you some feedback on the round tables and the event and what happened there. We're also going to set out for you what happens next and how you can get more involved in the process. So this is an opportunity for you to feed back in about any questions you have or any thoughts you have that we should be taking account of. So I'm just going to go back over some of the background here just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So some of you will be very familiar with this, others of you that are more recent members, and we are growing by 2 to 3 new members a week. The momentum behind the coalition is considerable. But we're just going to go over a few of the things that make us who we are. The first is what is a coalition? So it's a very unique proposition for me that actually we have all of the organizations coming together from all the different sectors of society. So as well as having science and academia, we've got businesses, we've got advisory firms, we've got policymakers, accountancy, we've also got NGOs and civil society. And all of those together under one platform, common vision of a world where business is conserving and enhances natural capital. That unique thing that brings us all together into one space. And for me, we are in a time of coalition. For the last 200-odd years since the Industrial Revolution, we've been focusing very strongly on understanding the expertise of our individual areas. And now the advances that we can make is when we bring those together, and that's exactly what the coalition is doing. We're here because we know that there is a serious problem. We look at the Living Planet report from WWF that we're actually depleting our resources extremely quickly. There are plenty of stories out there about why we need to be doing this. There's also a very pressing need from business, and that's why we're producing the protocol, to try and help to address that. There are very obvious risks and opportunities that are appearing for business, and we need to be able to address those. The coalition is to bring together, as I said, many of those approaches to natural capital under the one vision, but also to share and promote the best practice. We're also building the business case, although I personally think that's extremely strong now. I think we've still got a job to promote that and to make sure that's understood. We're also looking to obviously develop, test, and encourage the use of the standardized natural capital protocol that we're developing and the sector guides, which we'll give you a bit more information about in a moment. So to support the shift in corporate behavior, this is just about understanding what to do tomorrow. There is a much bigger question here about long-term issues and resources. Finally, it's about supporting the evolution of an enabling policy environment, but also the access to real data. And the Natural Capital Coalition at the moment is developing a longer-term strategy to be able to support both of those areas. And in fact, we have our first systems thinking workshop towards the end of this month around policy. I'm just and pause there for a moment to say that if you do have questions as we're going through this, please do use the question and answer or the chat function that are available on the website. You're obviously all muted at the moment, but we very much would welcome your thoughts and questions as we go on. So this shows you some of the organizations that are members of the coalition. As I was saying, this is an extremely impressive list of different organizations, ranging from leading businesses through to NGOs, through to institutions, scientists, etc. All of these are organizations, then they're not individuals, and we purposely do engage with at the organizational level and are growing every day. It's almost becoming impossible now to get all of the companies all onto one web page. We're going to have to start thinking about how we have better ways of engaging. One of the things we will be doing coming up in the fall, in the autumn here, is be launching better ways for the membership to engage. So I'll give a little bit more information about that in a little while. I just wanted to go back and remind you all about the protocol work that we're doing here. So who's involved in developing the Natural Capital Protocol? Well, as you're aware, many of our members have come together to help us to develop this. We've split this into two clear roles, but they are very much one team, and we have regular meetings weekly. We're working together to develop the protocol. And I think it's the strength of all of these organizations coming together that really does make this a unique proposition. Where before protocols or standards may be developed by one or two organizations and then taking it out to consultation, we've got a lot of input at the very beginning on this process, and really does help us to make sure that we're making something that is going to be very practical, but also decision useful for companies. We've got the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, who are leading a consortium you can see there of many different organizations who are helping us to develop the protocol and also a high-level guide for executives and stakeholders. We've got the IUCN-led consortium who is helping us to develop the sector guides, which we'll give you a bit more information about in a moment, but also helping us to run the business engagement and pilot testing. So what protocol cover? So one of the first things I think here is that it's to be applicable to all business sectors and all geographies. It's to be applicable to everyone. This is the reason why we will be developing sector guides as well, to make we can get into some of the relevant detail for organizations. Provide guidance on qualitative, quantitative, and also monetary valuation. And as we see in the reports from business engagement partners, the interviews we did with them, they gave us some very interesting feedback about how those three go together and the mix that we're looking at when we're developing the protocol. We'll also be looking through all of the different business applications. It's not just going to be looking at one application, but lots of different applications of how you might implement the Natural Capital Protocol. Also at different organizational levels as well. So you're looking at a corporate level, a project level, a product, a site, or even through the value chain. The sector guides. Just to be clear on this, the Natural Capital Protocol will be relevant to all sectors and all geographies, just as I was just saying. But that does mean that, therefore, we do need this dive within to different sectors. And the sectors we're going to be starting with. The first is the apparel sector and also the food and beverage sector. And these are being developed by the coalition by True Cost for us, which is part of the IUCN consortium. We also have an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with the Natural Capital Declaration, for development of a financial sector guide. And we've also started conversation with other sectors about future sector guides that we're going to develop. If you are interested and you come from a sector that isn't covered already, then please do get in touch with us. One thing that we are looking to do, though, is to go through, if we can, industry bodies or associations. We feel that will be a very strong way of engaging with the community within a sector and also for efficiencies and allows for us to have a much more breadth when we're reaching out to organizations. What would I like to cover? Well, first thing is they're going to help to define why natural capital and the methodologies that are in the protocol are relevant and the benefits to that sector and being very specific about that. It will help to support the identification of the material issues for natural capital, but the impacts and dependencies that are relevant to that sector. It will practical guidance for applying the protocol and to develop practical case studies to demonstrate examples of how that might work. So, today a very special day for us. We've been coming together for quite some time, and we've been doing an awful lot of work, but we have been rather quiet. So today we're actually able to launch two documents, as I mentioned before: the Natural Capital Protocol, the feedback report from business engagement partner interviews, and the draft Natural Capital Principles framework. These two documents are a significant milestone for us in our work and what we are doing. We did provide a glimpse of these to those members that were able to join us in London for the members event a couple of weeks ago. But today they have gone up online, and we've had a lot of interest already from many people about these two documents. I'll do a little bit more information around the feedback report, and then I'll hand over to a colleague to give us a little bit more thoughts on that. First of all, I just wanted to mention about the member event. So we had the member event in London. This was the first time the coalition had got together face-to-face since its broadening to the large organisations that are now involved. The purpose of doing this was threefold. First of all, to celebrate where we'd got to, and to be able to celebrate all of the good things that were going on. Also a chance to strengthen the community, and that was very obvious that at the end of the day, we still had many people in the room, and it was actually almost difficult to get people to go home because the conversation was going on. And to engage not just over these two documents that we produced, but also to start to look at some of the key issues, and we'll be thinking about that a little bit further in a moment. Actually, before I get on to talk a bit more about the report and what the business engagement partners have told us, was that we also launched a clock. Pavan, who I'm sure all of you know, he started the countdown clock for us. So if you go to our website now, we have a clock that is ticking down, counting down the hours and the minutes to us actually producing the protocol. It is something that I'm sending out to the work teams every week. Make sure that they're aware of how much time we have. There is a desperate need for us to keep on moving with this. We're producing something within a year that to get us to a point that we can move forward very quickly. There is a need to do something about this. There's already talk of other initiatives in this space, and we need to make sure that we're bringing the community together as much as possible around this area. So, business engagement report. This really, to me, is extremely significant. It's the first time I'm aware that there has actually been a review, an extensive view of the market. Why we did it. So, first of all, we did it, to understand the range of views in the market, also to identify any key factors that they thought would influence adoption. We also looked to try and determine what the primary intended applications might be and what those benefits might be, but also to try and capture from the business engagement partners what is currently working well and where some of those challenges are. Between February and May 2015, Young EY, they structured interviews which were conducted with the business engagement partners with inputs from Trucost and the UCN consortium. They used a questionnaire to agree upon what which was agreed with the technical group of coalition. They interviewed 80 different business engagement partners. They represented 15 different sectors, with consumer products having the largest representation, 14% of them, followed by construction and then food and beverage and apparel. There was regional analysis as well. All geographical regions were covered. However, there was a significant proportion of them based in Europe and the UK. But when we started talking to them about where their impacts were, obviously the impacts are much more global. We also had some perspective on who was being interviewed, and that was very interesting, that the majority of the people interviewed were champions within the business, so sustainability teams, 47% of people. But there was a wide spread of others as well, with technical users making up a significant amount, and also senior leaders, the C-suite as well, being involved there. These are extremely interesting. First of all, coming out of these interviews, there were 8 adoption factors that were identified, and these are there that the business engagement partners felt could help to drive the uptake of the protocol. There were 6 primary intended applications, or primary uses, as we call them here, and 4 main areas of anticipated benefit. And this is something that will help us to feed into our thinking as we continue to develop the protocol framework and the work that we're doing towards launching the global protocol next year. As you see from the adoption factors, what they first of all was it was clear that what it is to establish a clear framework that's accessible, full and aligned, and that then should convey both credibility and relevance, and also drive meaningful results that are comparable, decision useful, so unlock value for the organizations. All of these were given different weightings depending on the range of views. So we had a number of clear common themes that come out of this, but there was also a diversity of views and some strongly held opinions. And when you're reading through the report, this comes through very clearly. For example, with accessibility, there was a majority view that supported that very clearly. And one of the quotes that's included in the report from Taylor Wimpey was that ultimately the protocol has to be practical in order to be successful, and a tremendous amount of complexity in the natural capital space. But for it to be possible to integrate the protocol in our day-to-day operations, it has to be both simple and workable. And I think going through the report, you'll see that some of these, such as the flexibility, have more of a minority view, that actually principles a very strong point of view, and you'll see when we get onto the framework, it's a principles-based approach. There was also some call for some rules-based approach as well. But overall, the minority view was around flexibility. With alignment, there was a mixed view with that. Actually, it should be seen that should be harmonized or clearly linked with other available initiatives, and that's something that we're working towards as well. Get to the what it conveys. Credibility, I think, is extremely important here, and I think one of the things that supports the approach that we're taking here is the mix of different organizations involved in helping us to put this together. It has got to be helpful to business, but we've got to take into account the broader community where this protocol will sit. And that's why it's really important we have organizations such as IUCN and WWF involved in the work that we're doing here. And I think that does help to add the credibility to what we're doing. It isn't just done by business for business, but it is going to be practical for business in its outcomes. The majority opinion as well around making sure that it is relevant, and that's something that links up very closely, you'll know, with many of the other initiatives around what really material, what is really relevant to an organization for it to take it forward. Around what drives meaningful results, the main thing here, I think, for me, is around making sure that it is decision useful, and that's a majority view by those organizations taking part in the interviews. And it was very clear that it came across that it's got to be applied first and foremost to corporate decision making. One thing I do repeat, it seems, is that we are not producing here a reporting framework. There are many reporting frameworks already out there that are extremely good, but the gap that is missing here is about helping organizations to make better decisions and having a standardized approach to that. Therefore, the message coming through here from the business engagement partners that it's got to be decision useful very much supports and validates the approach that we're taking. From the primary uses, there are 6 primary uses that we're identifying here. They take you through all the way from strategic planning through to external reporting. And all of these have different levels of significance. And once again, when you're going through the report, there's an interesting comment around this. For the 4 main benefits that are identified, the majority of people were looking at risk being the main benefit to do this. Obviously, many organizations have had significant risks in supply chains most recently. So there are other risks as well, possibly around policy and around product innovation, but also being able to measure the real impacts of what is going on. I think that always just focus on the risks. There are obviously advantages to understanding the impacts as well, whether it's around competitive advantage or around reputational benefits, as well as obviously making sure that there's better decision making. So how will this influence the protocol? First of all, this report will, these views will be taken into account alongside other inputs, including piloting, which we'll talk about in a while, and the expert review panel that we're setting up at the moment, as well as a consultation. Will also be a frame of reference for version 0, which we'll be bringing out to the piloting companies in October. And it also provides a means to further engage the market and make sure that we are creating that endorsement for what we are doing here, and that the work is going to be fit for purpose. I'm going to pause there for a moment. I've given you quite a lot of information. What I'd like to do before I pass over is to remind you all that we've got the Q&A section here. At the moment, we've got, as I can see, 53 people on the presentation. So please do think about what questions you might have about what I've been talking about. If you want to raise something or tell the community that's on the call with us something that you've been up to as well, then please let us know. We'll find a way of engaging you in it. What I'd like to do now, though, is pass over to the Technical Director of the Natural Capital Coalition, who is on to comment from us from KPMG, Stephanie Heim, who's going to run us through the framework and principles for the draft framework and principles for the Capital Protocol, and talk us through some of the other work that's going on at the moment. So thank you very much, Stephanie. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Mark, and it gives me great pleasure to talk to you this afternoon and really start sharing our thinking in relation to this draft protocol, and also in relation to the principles and the framework that have been developed by the technical team. So as part of the member event on the 26th of June, Eva Zebi presented from the World Business Council Sustainable Development a first glimpse of the draft framework, and that's what I'm going to take you through today and what's being launched on the website. So start off looking at the draft principles. We currently have 4 principles. These are based on the outputs of the business engagement report that Mark has just been taking you through. Relevant, it came out as a significant concern and a thing that companies were particularly keen to have underpinning any kind of draft protocol, specifically ensuring that the assessment identifies the natural capital impacts and or dependencies that are important and relevant for business and its stakeholders, depending on the context of that assessment that will be undertaken. In addition, rigorous, another principle came out quite strongly from that report, our engagement today, which is really about trying to use the most up-to-date, technically correct information that you can. In addition to that, reliability has also been mentioned, and as you will be able to see from our brochure, we have taken the definitions and modified these from standards that are already publicly available. In regard to reliability, the main crux of the matter is to be clear about the assumptions and the information that you're using and ensure that that's communicated open and honestly. Finally, consistent, ensuring that the assessment measures and or values impacts and dependencies with a consistent scope throughout. So they underpin the draft framework. The framework itself looks like this, and it's got 4 overarching stages to it. Frame, which helps you understand why you want to do a natural capital assessment, scoping of that assessment, the what, the measure value, how you're going to do it, and finally the apply, the so what, have you met your objectives. So what I'm going to do is take you just quickly through those steps that you can see up there and tell you what other information is available online in the brochure of the framework. So step 1, getting started, is about identifying how natural capital is relevant and important to your business. Moving on to the scoping stage, you've got to ask questions that help you define the objectives, scope the assessment, and determine those material impacts and dependencies. So really being underpinned by that principle of relevance. Moving on to the how, selecting measurement and valuation routes. May sound cryptic while we're talking about it at the moment, but there are a number of ways to approach measurement and valuation, and our current thinking for the draft protocol is that there will be different routes that you can take through step 5, 6, 7, and 8, and it will depend on whether you want to look at impacts and dependency and values from a business perspective, from a social perspective, or a mix between the two, and whether you wish to focus specifically on impacts or a bit of dependencies or dependencies on their own. Moving on from that would include some guidance as to the measurement of impacts and dependencies and estimating the changes in the background to natural capital. And finally, coming up with values for these impacts and dependencies. And while I'm speaking, it's just to note that while the approach is shown in a linear fashion at the moment, we fully expect this to be quite an iterative process, and that's for a number of reasons. Your thinking might change as you go through the process, and you may decide to revisit certain elements of the steps as you progress through. That might be due to data availability constraints, resource constraints, and so on and so forth. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Following on from the how, the measure and value, application, the apply stage, and that's really around guidance as to how to interpret the results that come out of these assessments, and also how to embed those in your organisational processes should you choose to. The book itself gives a bit more detail for each of these steps. It includes information on the key inputs and information that the step will provide, the actions that you'll need to take, and some detail about the expected outputs you gain by going through each step. So that's what's available in the brochure at the moment, and we fully expect both the draft principles and the steps to evolve over time as we go out to consultation, as we get more feedback on the process. So I'd actually like to talk to you about the roundtables that were held during the event. This was a valuable opportunity. We had approximately 100 companies and NGOs and representatives of different organisations come to our member event in London, and it seemed the right time to start engaging on this framework and sharing our latest thinking, and also thinking about wider questions in relation to natural capital and where we see the issue going in terms of businesses and how they're addressing the issue. So we have 7 round tables. One, as I said, exploring the framework and principles. One looking at what businesses want from the natural capital protocol and the development of sector guides. For that one, we specifically focused in on sector guides. The third, scoping and pilot testing for the protocol. The fourth, measuring and valuing natural capital. The fifth, on thinking on the data gathering and the need for data in these different types of assessments. And the last two were more overarching, so less focused on the actual protocol and the thinking thus far, more about the wider engagement and wider consideration. And those two were engaging the board around natural capital and creating a shift. So what's the end game here? What do we do in addition to the protocol and wider context? Those sessions were run by a number of individuals that are part of the development team and technical team. So it was a really great opportunity for the guys to get some feedback firsthand as to some of their initial thinking, so that it could be taken into account as part of the development process. So I'm just going to quickly take you through some of the outputs of the roundtable. There will be a document summarising these, but for now what I've chosen to do is show you a section of points for consideration and also points of agreement. So the roundtable exploring the framework draft and principles got some good feedback in relation to how it was structured and its clarity. But points for consideration included more emphasis in relation to stakeholder engagement. Likewise, the second roundtable that focused primarily on sector guides was me looking at the prioritisation of key commodities, and there was a lot of agreement that that was a good thing to be doing. And there are potential updates of specific commodities that are currently part of the apparel and food and beverage sector guides at the moment. Around table 3 in relation to scoping and pilot testing, points of agreement, again, really relating to engagement and making sure that smaller companies and smaller suppliers can be part of this process and we get some feedback from them. And also points of consideration, still strengthening that business case, emphasising the opportunities rather than just the risks associated with this area. Other roundtables, so for the measuring and valuation roundtable, it's around methods to be presented as guidance. So we had an initial question earlier today around, does that mean there'll be some choice within the protocol? And yes, that's the point around supporting the flexible nature of the protocol. So that feedback from the business engagement partners around the importance of flexibility is one of the reasons that approach has been taken. Also points for consideration, the routes that I alluded to when I was talking through draft framework were particular around the combinations of pathways for valuations and sort of considering how to communicate that and what guidance could be given around that. In terms of data needs, there's really a comment agreement on the reliability of data is still an issue in this area, and a need for trying to address that and some guidance on obtaining data, whether that forms a part of the protocol or as a separate piece in relation to data specifically is a point for consideration. And the two roundtables really talked about broadening the engagement and making sure that there was a shift in the narrative. Those key decision makers in companies are really bought in to the change and the consideration of these issues. That's really where I'd like to leave it. I could talk a lot about the outputs of the roundtable, but that will be summarised in a document later during the summer. What I'd like to do now is talk about what next, and of this we'll look at both the timeline that we're going to use, but also the tools we're going to use for consultation and really what members will get to see when and how things will be approached in that consultation period. We're then to follow up by responding to any of the questions that we've been receiving at the moment. Okay, so the timeline. The current timeline shows that we're partway through the writing of the protocol and the sector guidance, and those are going to be used, version 0, going to be used from October to with pilot companies, so that we can ensure that version 0, what we've produced of that protocol, gets really good feedback from those who are actually going to be using it, so that it can be improved. In the latter part of November, so from the 23rd of November at the World Forum on Natural Capital, we're going to launch a consultation, and that will mean that people will get a chance to comment on the version 0 of the protocol, and be able to use that feedback to help develop the protocol further from March through to June 2016, where we'll be launching the version 1 of it. So consultation. At the moment, we are developing this as we speak. So we've got 2 groups at the moment, but we will have a number of different engagements happening to make sure that wider community are represented and do also get a chance to comment. So there'll be an online consultation, and I'll take you through some snapshots of the tool that we'll be using and how we're going to be using that. And also piloting. So pilot companies will get on to either be something under deep dive or a broader pilot. A deep pilot is going to be someone who goes through each of those different steps that we've talked about today and is supported by the technical development team, ensuring that we get the right feedback as to how they found the process, so that we can incorporate that to our development at the early part of next year. So we'll be developing this process over the next couple of months. So if there are any suggestions or people would like to get in touch with us on the consultation and engagement in general, please do so by emailing info@naturalcapitalcoalition.org. Okay, so what are people going to see during the consultation? So on the 23rd of November, online, members of the coalition will see draft versions of the protocol and the sector guide for apparel and the sector guide for food and beverage. In addition, they'll receive a PDF file that they'll be able to review. Okay. How? We're lucky enough to be supported by a company who have an online collaboration platform called Gough. This all allows us to share draft version 0 protocol online, and allows us to get people to comment on sections of the protocol, enables us to produce online surveys and answer questions in real time, and also track activity on that consultation. It's something that's been used by a number of different standard setters recently, and something that we're really happy to get the chance to utilise here. We think that'll make a really great way of collecting all the comments that we'll sure we'll receive on drafts that are released. So this is a snapshot of the tool that shows how the protocol, sections of the protocol might be displayed, and how surveys might look with specific questions associated with different sections. So, as I said, this is all under development at the moment, but it gives you a quick snapshot as to what we're currently thinking about. So, what are we going to do with all that information? Well, we're going to consolidate it, and we're developing some ground rules for that. And that consolidation will need to make sure that we account for those who can't get online to that tool, who might be in places without a decent internet connection, other forms of engagement, workshops and so on and so forth, and how that feeds in to the same categorization. And again, that's something that we are developing along with these options for engagement. So, without further ado, I'd like to move on to the question and answer session associated with the framework, and thank you very much once again for allowing us to present reports.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. So we had some questions come in, but please do keep on adding to the list as we're going through. The first one I'll take is from Jeff Wilson, who's very sensibly suggesting that as we were talking about the apparel sector, his mind was gravitating towards the Higg Index. I'm very fortunate to have Ryan Young involved in helping us to develop the sector guide, who obviously was involved in developing the Higg Index, and I'm from the SAC. So there are already connections there. There are several different influences that we've identified to help us with the development of the sector guide, including Blue Sign, the World Speaks, OCOTEX, there's one European Commission, the Higg Index, etc. So what True Cost have done is they've brought together a working group and have already had the first workshop for the apparel sector. That includes a lot of these organizations already, and they've done the same thing to start the thinking around the food and beverage. So thank you for that. Yes, they're involved, but please do keep on reminding us of other things that are out there to make sure that we are aware of everything that we should be. The other thing I'll just up on here maybe is around the focus for the sector guides. So we mentioned that there is we're working on apparel and food and beverage. We have started conversations with other sectors. One of those is the built environment, also water and forestry, and some of the others that we've started conversations with. But earlier on, if you are in a sector that you would like to have represented and start thinking about what a guide might look like for you, please do get in touch with us. We would like to do it through associations and bodies. So if you are a member of a body that and be to come through them, then please do it that way. But do get in touch with us again. And we haven't decided on anything yet. We haven't set out the plan of action for it. But, so we're at the conversation stage. So plenty of opportunity. And obviously, if you're not in the first round that starts in June 2016, there will be other rounds following that where we'll want to be bringing out further sector guides as well. Maybe, Stephanie, you could pick up on the piloting and what that entails. We've had a question here from Michelle around that.
Okay, thanks for that. Well, piloting really can be quite detailed or at a level. So if I take you through both options, I think that makes the most sense. So in terms of the deeper pilots, there will be a certain number of that we look to make sure they go through each of the different steps in protocol. We'll be looking for feedback and quite a bit of commitment in terms of compiling templates and also providing feedback as to how they found each of the steps to go through. And we'll be working with our technical representatives to help them through that process. That represents quite a time commitment, but it will depend on the scope of the project and the context of assessment that you'd like to do. So we're being supported in that by the IUCN consortium, specifically the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership. So if you are interested in becoming a deep dive pilot, please do get in contact with info@naturalcapitalcoalition.org and we can pass you further contact details. details. If that's not for you, if that deep dive sounds like too much, we have a second type of piloting that's a slightly higher level. So the commitment associated with the feedback is slightly less, and you drive whether you wish to do all steps or whether you wish to do one or two steps, and how you want to engage with any technical representatives. That's very much up to you. So there again, we will have templates of feedback, but the commitment will be slightly less. So I would suggest, depending on what you're thinking about in terms of the type of assessment and the context of that assessment, that you get in touch with that information, and we pass you to our colleagues at Cambridge to help you decide which is the better approach for you. Okay, do you have any other questions?
So have any other questions that I can see coming through? I think one of the things I'd like to, I'll give you a little bit more time to think about that. But one of the things I'd just like to talk about is around the membership and what we're planning to occur later this year. So one of the things is that the coalition has been obviously our key project at the moment is developing this protocol. But I think it's extremely important that we also develop enabling space around it. So that means thinking about what the inputs might be into that, which would be around the data. And there's lots of organizations out there that we started conversation with around what the data is to natural capital, and we'll be looking to develop a work stream around that. There's also work, as I mentioned, around the policy element, and what does policy really mean in this space, and how does that, how can we start the conversation around systems thinking and policy change? What we're also going to be doing, particularly with growing membership, and we've gone out to all of the existing members and all of the business engagement partners, inviting them to become members of the coalition and support the work that we're doing here, is that one of the reasons to do that is to make sure that we've got a comprehensive list, because there are only different initiatives out there that want to take part. And great, if you are still sitting on that form, then please do get it back to us. But what we're doing in the fall is we're very fortunate to have a new secondment coming into the coalition, and we'll have a relationship manager. I'll be able to announce more about that in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully. And relationship manager will be helping us to run these forums that we're going to be setting up. So the first of those will be a coalition forum for senior managers, and that'll be much around the direction that we should be taking. Talking about some of the broad issues and setting out some of the work plans and the really important things that we need to be addressing. There'll be an operations group which will be launched for those people who are actually involved in the day-to-day workings of natural capital. They can share some of their thoughts and best practice, talk about some of the initiatives that they're working in, and help to develop a cohesion and momentum behind some of that work. And the third group that we'll be launching will be a communications group. I think there's a long way to go. We now, as a community, coming together around a lot of the topics that we're talking here, but a long way to go before we can communicate that with other people outside of our group. So, those are three things and three very positive reasons to join. I'd also like to make it clear that the more people that we have engaged in this process, the more successful we're going to be. So please do get involved. You will get access to materials ahead of other people if you are a member. We will be able to engage with you much more fully. There's no cost to become a member. We are looking for voluntary contributions from people if they would like to make them, but there is no cost to becoming a member. But you do have to sign up to the mission and vision statement, and that's really important to us. Another question just coming in here about the World Forum on Natural Capital. So we obviously, along with the Scottish Wildlife Trust, who convened that event, with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Natural Capital Declaration, and also the ICN, Out to convene that conference, which will be in Edinburgh this year on the 23rd and 24th of November, and we'll be there will be 4 different work streams. There's a lot of information on the website. It's starting to ramp up at the moment. We'll be launching at the dinner on the evening of the 23rd. We're launching the consultation formally for any organisation to get involved. Now, engaging with members in advance of that, members will have logons to the online system to be able to get involved, and they will be getting additional materials. But the consultation will be open to anyone that wants to take part. We're very open to engagement on this. It will be launched, like I say, at that event. Pilot companies will be getting, before that, in October the 5th, as you can see from the timeline on the screen at the moment, they're getting the protocol then to start the piloting process. So they will be getting it in advance, and there'll be specific questions that we'll be looking to have answered through that piloting process. But as I'm sure you can understand, having 4 months to carry out that piloting process, it's a condensed amount of time. We really need to get that started. The consultation, like I say, will be starting on the end of November. We will be also, though, as Stephanie mentioned, we'll be having some workshops. So several of our members already have started organising workshops, October, November, through to February, where they'll be bringing their members together to start engaging on this process. So there are several of those that are already set up, and if you're in a member organisation or you want to talk to us about that, then we're very happy to come in and start considering how a workshop for you and for others in your sector might work in this area. So rather than just bringing you in as an individual organisation, we can also bring you in as a group, and maybe there's some benefit to that. I think to also mention about the expert panel that we're bringing together, we're also making sure that covers all of these different areas as well, from science to academia to accountancy to business. We want policy. We want all those in the same space as well. We're looking to find some very solid engagement there to help with the consultation and can be a sounding board for some of the thoughts that are coming through. Hope that helps to answer that question. Was there anything, Stephanie, that you wanted to add in at this time?
I think really the main point is get involved. So as Mark has stated, as I talked through, we are developing the consultation on exactly what that's going to look like and the different ways that we engage. So if you have particular questions, if you want to be involved, if you have particular interest, do get in touch with us. We are still developing all the different ways in which that will work over the summer, so you can contribute to that, and that would be brilliant.
Thank you much. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found this informative. The ask back to you now is do get involved, do get in touch with us. If there's anything that comes through, anything you think about in the next couple of days and you want to come back and have a conversation with us about it, pick up the phone. This is all about collaboration. That's what is going to make this such a success. When we launch this in June 2016, we've got to be thinking about what this, the endorsement that we can get behind this, and therefore really need to make sure that we have all of the organisations that are involved in this space joined together. There's several other things that we will be planning to launch, so we will be back in touch. There'll be further webinars to come on. If you've got ideas about things that we should be doing, ways that we can engage in, stories that we share, to get in touch. Thank you for your time today, and look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.